Welcome back to more Skyrim with Requiem, playing on the melee Conjurer build, so just using bound weapons and whatever creatures I can summon. So since the last episode, I've leveled up Conjuration to 25, taken 3 new perks there, so I've suddenly got a much more effective bound sword and access to the Ghostly Warhound, which is perhaps my favorite summon ever to use for the early and mid game. And the plan here is just to do some bandit quests in the Whiterun area to pick up some more loot, some levels, so that I can continue to fund more skill books and more training. And for this, I'm doing the voiceover after the fact because I didn't have my microphone on. Hopefully that's not too distracting. Anyway, the first area I'm going for is over near Greenspring Hollow. It's called Igors Camp, and it's added by the More Bandit Camps mod, which I really like. Anyway, after looting this little area, I'm starting to head toward the camp to hopefully, I think it was the sword for the one-handed trainer guy, to return his item to him. And I don't have any great defense against arrows at this point, but it looks like all the enemies are distracted over on the other side of the river by some creature. So because they're kind of reluctant to cross water, I go over to them. And something I've noticed and that I use a lot is if you approach an enemy with a one-hand weapon and get up close to them, they'll almost always do an attack. So if you walk up to something and do a bash with the torch, it almost always works unless they're already blocking. And that's a pretty nice way to get a little bit of damage and some free hits in. And the enemy AI is a little bit predictable in that regard, and I take advantage of it quite a bit just to make these combats a little bit easier, because I don't really have any armor or very much hit points. All my magicka has been going into, or all my levels have been going into magicka so far, so I don't really have much in the way of defense. And of course wearing robes, so no armor, so the big plan is just to not get hit. And after driving off a couple of these guys, well, I can fight one or two without too much difficulty, but more than that, it's pretty impossible. So you can see how much damage just getting hit once with a little slash attack does. It almost kills me. But with the help of the Ghostly Warhound, I'm able to take down the rest of this pack of guys pretty easily. And from there, it's just a little bit of looting before I move on to the next area that I'm interested in. And that one is, I have to travel directly across the plains of Whiterun, and I think that takes me by Swindler's Den, because the next bandit camp I want to go to is very close to Rorikstead. Anyway, with the various overalls I have going, Swindler's Den has a couple of guys outside, so I just take a little fight with them. Even though I don't really intend to go inside the cave right now, I don't want these guys sneaking up behind me as I go further along. And the Ghostly Warhound is doing its job perfectly, just distracting these enemies. It also does pretty respectable damage. And you can see how much of a difference the extra perk into bound weapons is making. I've suddenly got, I'm not sure exactly how much or what weapon tier that it's equivalent to, but I know that it does more damage than, say, like an orcish mace or whatnot, using the Daedric sword with just the one extra perk into it. So pretty happy with that so far. And then I'm moving on over toward this other bandit encampment located near Rorikstead. And this one, I'll say up front, it took me a couple of tries, and so I'm playing pretty cautiously around here because I know there's some archers in there that can one-shot me, so I'm just hiding behind this rock encampment and casting some summons to try and draw some enemies out toward me. And yeah, that was an arrow. Even at pretty long range, it was still, I would call it near death. just getting hit by that one shot there. So I really want my summons to take care of those for me at range, and I've got a summon swarm ability in my left hand now, which is pretty awful, just a generally bad spell, but I don't have anything else that deals range damage, so it's very slightly better than nothing. And I nearly get blindsided by that guy who came up around to the side of the encampment I was hiding behind, and now I've got a couple of them chasing after me, but I've drawn them away from the fort and the archers, which is what's really important for my purposes, because the advantage of using bound weapons and robes is there's nothing reducing your speed, so I move a lot faster than any of these guys, so as long as I'm playing carefully, there's no real reason that I need to get hit by them in melee. And again, the bash attack on the torch is awesome for interrupting two-handers. The big thing to be aware of is that if you run into a guy who has more perks and therefore more attack speed in it, then it can throw off your timing, and that's a pretty easy way to get yourself killed. But I'm just taking advantage of my mobility and ability to dodge around these big swings that these guys are sending at me, and I'm able to take them out pretty well. And I spot this troll over here and figure, well, I'm pretty sure I can take him. My damage is pretty high, but I want to have a summon up just to distract its attention so it's not going straight after me. And after using the torch to interrupt health regeneration, a couple of power attacks, and we have a dead troll. And now I can see the little red dots on my compass, and usually when there's guys hanging back after a fight is over, often they're either wounded and have retreated from the fight, or they're archers. So if I charge in trying to take care of the wounded guys, getting killed by an archer is a pretty bad feeling. So I'm still planning to be pretty cautious as I make this final approach and just pick off these guys who are left over from the earlier fight. So I'm kind of taking this roundabout route because I can see those little dots on the compass and get a transmuted flesh up, so I've got a little more hit points in hopes of not getting one shot by an archer if there does happen to be one down there. And I'm still kind of hiding behind whatever I can, waiting for my magicka to get high enough so I can cast another Warhound to draw out whatever this is, and it turns out to just be a wounded guy, not an archer. And for whatever reason, this other guy who didn't come into the fight earlier. But that's the end of him on this little camp. So I loot the place, then run over to Rorikstead, and then ride the cart from there and back over to Whiterun. And here I decide to double back after going to Whiterun to sell off whatever I had and do the Swindler's Den. I don't have the In My Time of Need quest, either now or really ever, because I don't plan to do Bleak Falls Barrow for a very long time if I even do it at all. But this is a conveniently located bandit cave, and I figured I'd just go through it for some experience and hopefully to find some stuff that would sell. So I'm moving pretty quickly through here, but I see the guy in the back with a crossbow, and I know I want to back up into the hallway so that he doesn't get a chance to shoot at me. And I can tell he's kind of aiming at my wolf at that point, but then I'm hiding back in this corner off to the side so that he can't get a clean shot at me, because I'm pretty sure that crossbow will kill me in one hit. So now I just need to wait for a second for the wolves to do the job. And here's one annoying thing about using bound weapons, is if you accidentally tap the key twice to bring up your summon or whatever other spell, then you can put away your weapon by accident, which is what happened there. Is I had the Spectral Warhound on both my left and my right, so my weapon got put away and then I had to recast it, which is very, very annoying when it happens in the middle of combat because suddenly you're without a weapon and may not have enough magicka to restore it for a while, and because the summon spells have the same image in your hand as the weapon does, the visual often doesn't tell you. So there's no great way around that I've found except to just be very aware of how many times you press your hotkeys. Anyways, I know there's a couple of archers hiding on both the high ground and in the back of this room, so I don't really want to run in to the middle of this area. I'd rather have enemies come into this hallway where I can take them out one at a time, because my weapons deal great damage, but I really can't afford to take any hits, so I just kind of peek in there to see which guys have an angle on me. And here I notice there's the archer on the upper level, and so I use my summon up there to either distract or kill it. The Spectral Warhound is actually both very fast and does above average damage, so it takes care of light armor guys really easily. This guy is just turtling behind his shield, but I get an abash attack when he tries to hit me, and that ends it pretty fast. And I notice there's an archer over here, so I try running at right angles to it to waste its first shot, and I get a little bit lucky that when I charge in there, he's not able to get off a shot in time, because, yeah, getting hit at close range by an arrow probably would have been deadly. But in that case, my timing was good enough where I'm able to get away with it. And here I'm just being pretty cautious, because I don't know what kind of weapons these guys have. So, continuing to take the lead with the Warhound. And when I'm looting guys, my main thing I'm looking for is just anything cheap or anything light that sells well. But after doing Swindler's Den, I look around and there's not a whole lot of other nearby bandit camps, so I decided to go for White River Watch instead. And this one is very close to Whiterun. It's got a lot of alchemy ingredients to pick up within it, so I really like doing it early on, and it's not terribly difficult. There's some parts in there where there's kind of a high density of enemies, but for the most part it's not too tricky. And making use of my Lesser Knock spell to grab whatever loot I can, and then on we go into the cave itself. Just the main purpose of this being to pick up alchemy and smithing ingredients, so I'm trying not to spend too much time on that, but at the same time not leave a whole lot of stuff behind either. And I'm just kind of checking around behind me because I don't want some random enemy that might be around there to spawn on top of me as I enter this new zone. Inside of White River Watch, we're using basically the same tactics as everywhere else. I've got a little bit of sneak capability, but not enough to actually get past anything. And it's in zones like these where I really miss the option to have some kind of a ranged attack, because it would be great to be able to take some sniper shots at these guys before the fight gets going. But with the skills I'm using, and without some of the more advanced conjuration spells, that's not really an option, so I just put on my buffs, cast my minion, and get ready to go and fight these guys. But the Spectral Warhound is just absolutely wrecking most of those. So even though there's the archer up here, they don't really get a chance to shoot at me effectively. And I'm just kind of grabbing whatever loot along the way that I can quickly, and I'll, on the way out, pick all the alchemy ingredients. But for the moment, I'm just leaving those alone because they interrupt the flow of the game too much. And I'm just trying to lure guys to come at me around this corner because, well, as you saw, I think that previous one was just a mage, which I don't want to be fighting at long range. And against these two-handers, the key is just to not get close enough for them to take big hits at you. But I feel pretty good about my ability to bash those big slow swings. And the one-handers without shields are actually some of the more I think dangerous enemies because their attacks are a bit less predictable. And when they're using a sword, it usually comes out too fast where I'm not, my reflexes anyway, aren't good enough to where I can do a bash parry just on reflex to them. So here I'm just relying mostly on my summon to take this guy out while I'm hiding back around the corner, because I still don't know if there's more archers or whatever that are standing around behind this guy waiting to snipe me. But after the Warhound takes down that guy, I feel a little bit better about advancing forward, because at least there's going to be some kind of a distraction standing in the way between me and anything with a ranged attack. And the Warhound has just a remarkable amount of hit points. Perhaps too much for balance purposes, because it just outperforms pretty much any other minion you can get at this level. But I'm certainly not complaining, because it's really what's making it possible for me to go through these areas at a good pace. And I can tell there's one more guy up here, and there's usually an archer who stands up on the rocky cliff area up top. So I was being kind of slow about proceeding around that corner, but it turns out to not be anything all that dangerous. And I decide I'll just try and put this wolf out of its misery before I go on and fight the guy who's standing at the very top of the little cave area. But before I do that, I decide to go and take a rest at one of the bandit beds, because that's the only way I can save the game in this section because of the hardcore saving overhaul. And I know that the bandit chief at the top of this area is certainly capable of one-shotting me if I'm not careful. So there's not really any margin for error in this fight. So getting a save game off was just my way of making sure I didn't have to repeat clearing all those enemies over again. But this guy, the fight is extremely simple. Just have to distract him, don't try and hit him while he's focusing on me, and just take advantage of the times when he's going after my minion instead. And doing that, and with my pretty high damage on my weapon, I'm able to kill him very quickly. And after this, I took a while, and I went and did some crafting, used up all the alchemy ingredients and stuff that I had found so far before I went over to Vaultime Towers. So I had picked up another 3 levels. I'm up to level 15 now, so that I could take the base illusion perk, and then I was able to train up illusion to 35 so I could take the perk for empowered blur, because I tried this a couple of times on a lower level and I kept dying to archers, but after having blur it's suddenly much easier. It gives me a little bit of armor rating, which is slightly helpful against melee enemies, but more importantly it means that I'm not going to get one shot by archers who are hanging out on top of the cliffs anymore. And so here I just want to kind of split guys up into more modest-sized groups, using my Warhound to distract the melee enemies so I can pick off the archers that are over to the sides. And yeah, here doing things that I would never even consider, like getting up in the face of that archer to kill him off. That would have been way too risky before I had blur, but with that up, the chance of me dying to one arrow is extremely low. And the other thing I'm trying to be aware of is, even though I expect enemies to just be coming across the tower walkway and then down the stairs, sometimes they will walk across the river instead and then come at you from the side, and getting power attacked by something that came from a direction you didn't expect is another easy way to get killed. So I'm just kind of backing up a little bit here so I've got enough space to handle these enemies. But because I'm so much faster than any of the melee guys, they're not all that threatening as long as I can take them one or two at a time. And there I did take a hit, but you can kind of see the difference of the extra armor from Blur made. It only took half my health instead of like 80%. And then I'm able to finish that pretty high level melee enemy off. And this last part can be kind of tricky because there's a bunch of archers who get clumped up on the bridgeway. So if you're at all vulnerable to arrows, they can be just a huge pain to kill. I'm testing the Warhound here just so I have a decoy so I can get up close enough to them to get some attacks in. But they're all kind of gummed up here in this area and aren't able to gang up on me very effectively. So I'm feeling pretty good at this point, but I still want to back up because I want to have a Warhound as support, especially when there's a Spirit Wolf who might be coming and chasing after me. So after I get my summon up, I'm making my way up across the bridge again, and because of that one enemy yielding in the middle, all these others are kind of jammed up, and I take a hit and decide that I want to retreat a little bit so I have a chance to heal, because while I can survive one hit now, I definitely can't survive two. But I suppose I'm a little bit lucky in that enemies have kind of come out into this roadway area where I've got a lot more room to maneuver in, which is pretty good for me. And then if the wolf jams them up a little bit on the stairs, I can get in attacks from the side. And all of their AI seems to be a little bit confused in this early area, but then the bandit boss, Elsie, comes out, and she is extremely scary, attacks really fast with her battle staff, and will almost certainly one-shot me. So I decide this is the place where I want to use my racial power so that I can tank some hits. But the combination of my power attack along with the wolf and the little bit of damage it had apparently done to her earlier makes that fight a little bit anticlimactic, I would say. But now I just want to clear out the rest of the guys in here so I can loot whatever's on the other side of the towers. And Blur is definitely the MVP here. Not having to worry about arrows both lets me do a little bit more aggressive tactics so that the fights go faster, and it also reduces the number of kind of frustrating one-shot deaths, and especially since with having limited saves, I want to be able to both play kind of fast but not have to redo a bunch of fights because of one death. So I'm actually feeling a ton better about this character now that I've got Blur. It's like a night and day difference, because even though I still don't have very much in the way of health, as long as I'm playing carefully enough to not take hits, my defenses are now adequate to do the style of combat that I want to be doing. So after that, I just take whatever I can and move on to my next bandit bounty, which is over at Silent Ruins. And this is another one where the early archers can make it extremely tough if you don't have a way to deal with them. And there you can see I took a pretty big chunk of damage from that arrow, but Blur is still being super effective, even though it has the slightly annoying effect of not being able to see my hands or whatever it is that I'm doing, but that's a trade-off I'm willing to make. So I'm just kind of picking off the guys who are on the outside of this area, and then going up the center stairway to take on Ron the Crow, the unique bandit leader who is camped out here at Silent Ruins, and he is pretty deadly with both the unique mace that he carries as well as his bow, which is equipped with arrows of shock. So I really don't want to be fighting Ron at any sort of a long range, because even with Blur, the lightning arrows that he's got will still probably kill me really fast. So I'm trying to keep the fight in this kind of closed area, hoping that my Warhound is distracting his allies enough. And they're mostly archers, so once I get up close to them, then they're not nearly as deadly, but I'm kind of unclear about where my enemies are focused at right there, so I want to get outside again so that I've got more room to move around in as I try and take care of Ron. And again, using the Summon Swarm ability just has a little something to do at range. I think the spell is still pretty awful, but still better than nothing. And after I've got Ron, he gets tempted to bring out his bow, but he's in range of my attack, so I destroy his bow, and then I'm able to take him down pretty quickly after that. But again, the most important part of this character is don't get hit. Decent loot over at Silent Moons, grabbing whatever I can here, and Ron is not the official bandit boss, so I have to go inside the little cave section here in order to collect my bounty. And this is another area that, even though it's small, it actually has given me troubles in the past, because there can be an archer who just hangs out at the back of this corridor. I decide to try out a little bit more of this skeletal hero. I figure it might be good in this enclosed space where range isn't as important. But that ends up being pretty accurate. It does a lot of damage with the War Axe, even though it's kind of slow to attack. So I like having that as sort of a backup option. But that's about all I have for now, and I think next my plan will be to go over to Riften and clear out those areas for a little bit more loot and some alchemy ingredients and such, so I can continue leveling up. I need to have a lot more training into Conjuration, because before I can fight undead, I'm going to need more perks there. So far so good. I'm having a good time with the character. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see updates as this series continues, and I'll see you in the next one.